The rapid rise and fall of David Benioff and D.B. Weiss has always perplexed me. They shot out of relative obscurity by landing a project on a pitch that they had, by their own admission, no business in making. Where did they come from? Where are they going next? These are the things that I intend to explore over the next few minutes. Let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, hiss and foes, welcome to the Culture Casino!
So where do we start? Well, let's start with some humor. When you Googled bad writing back in 2019, the two D's names came up. That's right. Dan and Dave were at the top of the list of bad writing, which I think is kind of funny. But at least at that time, the fans were kind of in lockstep about their frustrations. Fans were either disappointed or furiously angry, and not a lot of people were very satisfied with the last two seasons of Game of Thrones. After the destruction of those last two seasons, how could these two men find work ever again? Well, as you know, they did. They actually had huge media companies knocking at their door, offering them Brinks trucks full of money. And it was perhaps the greatest stroke of luck that Netflix came calling with about $200 million as their cloud of destruction was set to descend upon Star Wars over at Lucasfilm at the time. So maybe we dodged a bullet. But where did they come from? Well, David Benioff Friedman was a screenwriter, or I guess he is still a screenwriter, but he was born into a massive amount of wealth as his father was the head of Goldman Sachs for quite a period of time. He spent his college days at Dartmouth, where he spent a lot of time with the other frat boys, and then he became a bouncer and a teacher and a wrestling coach. He decided that he wanted to pursue an academic career and headed to Trinity College, where he met his collaborator, D.B. Weiss. Of the two, D.B. Weiss has much less to crow about upon entering the public eye with Game of Thrones. He met Dave at Trinity College, where they were each pursuing a degree in Irish literature. Dan then finished up his MFA, which is the Masters of Fine Arts, at Iowa. And he bounced around Hollywood in various assistance roles. And I think for a period of time he was even an assistant to Glenn Frey, the musician. He wrote a book, it was called The Lucky Wonder Boy, that revolved around video games. And from that, he got a gig writing the script for a Halo movie. Of course, the Halo project actually died in 2007. It seems his only true claim to fame was that when he collaborated with Dave on Game of Thrones, he was able to land a long-term gig. Now, Dave, when he left Trinity a year after arriving, he became a DJ in Wyoming and had designs on becoming a writer, obviously. He treated the year in Wyoming as a DJ as an opportunity to kind of have a writing retreat. And he became inspired by another television hack named Michael Chabon because he read one of his books. So he went off to UCI, which is the University of California, Irvine, to complete his MFA, because I guess that's where Michael Chabon went. Great. He was listed in 2001 as one of the top 50 most eligible bachelors by People magazine, despite the fact that at this point in time he hadn't actually done much. The thesis that he wrote for his Master of Fine Arts was his book, that became eventually The 25th Hour. When a trade copy of that was circulating around Hollywood, Tobey Maguire actually solicited him to write a screenplay based on The 25th Hour, and that was later turned into the film that starred Edward Norton. He then wrote the screenplay for Troy, which of course starred Brad Pitt, and Warner Brothers bought that screenplay from him for $2.5 million. From there, he wrote Stay, which is, I guess, kind of a horror type of film. I haven't seen it. He wrote that in 2005, and of course that went into production and became a movie with Ewan McGregor and Naomi Watts. Many of the other screenplays at the time written by Benioff were shopped around Hollywood on a regular basis, and he, for whatever reason, found an interest in adapting George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. He reached out to his friend D.B. Weiss, who he had reconnected with in Santa Monica, California at some point around, I think, the 2000s. I didn't get all of that. But he reached out to him, and they began collaborating on the initial scripts. Now, to date, the only other time that they'd worked together had yielded an unmade script called The Headmaster. I think that was for HBO as well. HBO put a development deal into place for the pilot upon reading, I guess, parts or all of the entire screenplay, and I guess that was that. Ironically, the two would work together on many things outside of Game of Thrones, including a show that was actually designed to replace the Game of Thrones show once they had completed the George R.R. Martin stories. And of course, when HBO found out that there was a backlash to this show because the show was called Confederate, they bowed to the pressure and the whining that the mainstream media and others had done about the idea of, telling a story about a stalemate during that period of time in American history. So, in 2018, while they were still in production of Game of Thrones, Disney came calling, and they had reached an agreement with the D&D, with the big head and the little head, or whatever you want to call these guys, to write a new series of Star Wars films, at least a trilogy, maybe more. And they wanted that as soon as they were done with their Game of Thrones commitments. So this opportunity, of course, evaporated in some fashion as either a result of their Netflix deal, or, as some reports suggested, they were let go because of the poor reception of the last two seasons of Game of Thrones. So many stories actually circle around D&D leaving the Star Wars trilogy that they were set to write. More than one of those stories pointed towards toxic fans, not just for the Star Wars folks, but also for Game of Thrones as well. Regardless, Dan and Dave, to date, had only produced for Netflix the Leslie Jones comedy special as part of their deal, at least until the news broke yesterday. It seems they're going to try to solve the three-body problem. And no, they're not literally going to work out the astrophysics issue. They are actually working on a new sci-fi show based on the Chinese book series trilogy by Liu Cixin. By now, many of you have already heard this news, but you may not know who else is involved in this project. Alexander Wu is a key component of this production team, as his experience as a writer on True Blood will be invaluable for the aspects of the fantasy parts of this production. Brad Pitt is involved. He brings the star power and the production experience, although the extent of his involvement hasn't really been fleshed out as of yet. But the name that actually gives me pause, and one of the biggest cringes of my life, was that of Rian Johnson. You remember Rian Johnson, right? The guy who single-handedly destroyed not only Luke Skywalker, but the entire Star Wars theatrical saga retroactively. Yeah, that Rian Johnson. Oh, and let's not forget that the huge involvement by the Chinese production companies that for some reason are controlling the three-body universe. This, of course, will come with Chinese government oversight, as pretty much everything involving a Chinese company does. Despite Rian Johnson's involvement in the project, which of course invites catastrophe to anything based in genre, that's not really what I find amusing here. I'm amused that no article reviewed mentioned the first production that D&D did for Netflix was the Leslie Jones comedy special. In fact, the article here goes out of its way to highlight that this show is the first one that they're attached to, where they're writing. I'm also amused that the other thing that they're attached to so far is a 6-episode dramedy that was written by Amanda Peet, who, as you know, is married to David Benioff. Nothing like keeping it in the family. Regardless, the author of The Three-Body Problem, Liu Cixin, is quoted here as saying, "I have the greatest respect for and faith in the creative team adapting The Three-Body Problem for television audiences. I set out to tell a story that transcends time and the confines of nations, cultures, and races, one that compels us to consider the fate of humankind as a whole. It is a great honor as an author to see this unique sci-fi concept travel and gain fandom across the globe, and I am excited for new and existing fans all over the world to discover the story on Netflix." Knowing what Hollywood can do to timeless properties that transcend anything, I fully expect the racial and cultural strife to be the defining characteristics of this show. I truly hope not. Looks like I have a trilogy to read, just so I can prepare for this show. Maybe we should all read it. Anyway, thanks for spending a few moments here today. As we've walked through a brief history of the D's, Dave and Dan and Dave, and kind of what's going on with their $200 million Netflix deal. Remember to support other independent creators here on the platform. Be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands, and until next time, bye.
Thanks for visiting today. Be sure you're subscribed and hit that for alerts.
Yay!
Of course, like and share all of the videos that you can, as it helps with the algorithm. Have a great day.